The night was humid, thick with the weight of injustice. When it happened, Senator John Kennedy was walking back to his car after a late community meeting in Baton Rouge, where he had been speaking about unity, fairness, and the need to bridge racial divides. He carried himself with his usual calm confidence, greeting a few locals who recognized him. But as he reached the corner of the dimly lit street, a shadow emerged from the dark. An officer, his baton gripped tightly in his hand, anger flashing in his eyes. What followed was a moment so raw, so cruel, that it would leave everyone in shock. Without warning, the officer barked orders at Kennedy. His tone wasn't that of law enforcement, it was dripping with prejudice. The officer didn't care who Kennedy was, he only saw a target for his rage. When Kennedy tried to calmly explain who he was and that he had just come from a public meeting, the officer struck him across the arm with his baton. The sharp crack echoed through the quiet street. Kennedy staggered back, not in fear, but in disbelief. Around them, a few witnesses gasped. Some pulled out their phones, recording the scene. But Kennedy didn't react with anger. He didn't shout or strike back. Instead, he straightened himself, his hands still trembling from the pain of the blow, and locked eyes with the officer. His gaze wasn't filled with hatred, it was filled with a power the officer didn't expect. Dignity. "Son," Kennedy said firmly, his voice carrying the weight of years spent defending justice, "you may have struck me with that baton, but you haven't broken me. You've only revealed who you really are." The officer, taken aback, sneered and stepped forward again, raising his baton. But by this time, the crowd had grown. People were recording, shouting at the officer to stop. The tension was unbearable, yet Kennedy didn't move. He stood tall, as though daring the man to reveal the depth of his cruelty before the eyes of the world. Within minutes, backup arrived, and here was the twist: the other officers recognized Kennedy instantly. Their faces turned pale as they rushed to de-escalate the situation. The racist officer tried to defend himself, claiming Kennedy had resisted, but the videos told the truth. The crowd shouted for justice, and Kennedy, though still in pain, raised his hand and called for calm. "Don't answer hate with hate," he told the people gathered. "We fight prejudice not by becoming what they are, but by holding on to who we are. Better, stronger, wiser." His words washed over the tense crowd like water over fire. People lowered their voices, but their determination only grew. The officer was taken into custody that very night, the baton still in his belt, and for once, accountability did not vanish into the shadows. In the days that followed, the footage spread across the country. Newscasters replayed the moment of the strike, but more importantly, they replayed Kennedy's calm, unshaken response. Communities everywhere began talking about dignity in the face of hate, about standing up without stooping down. The officer's career collapsed under the weight of his own actions, and his department was forced to face questions it had long ignored. But the true lesson wasn't for the officer, it was for everyone watching. Kennedy's refusal to fight hate with hate showed people that courage isn't measured in fists or weapons, but in how you carry yourself when the world tests you the hardest. Weeks later, at another community event, someone in the crowd asked Kennedy how he had managed to stay so calm in that terrifying moment. He paused, looked out across the audience, and said, "Because if I lose my humanity to prove a point, then I've already lost the battle. I would rather stand tall and be struck down than bend to hatred and rise as something less than a man." The hall erupted in applause, not just because of the words, but because people knew they came from a man who had lived them. And so, what began as an act of cruelty ended as a lesson, a reminder that justice may be slow, that hatred may be loud, but dignity and truth have a power no baton can break. By the end, the officer had lost everything: his badge, his pride, his influence, while Kennedy walked away with something far greater: the respect, love, and inspiration of countless people who saw in him the kind of strength the world desperately needs. The story became more than just one incident. It became a call to action, a living example of how to confront racism and cruelty without letting it define who you are. And for everyone who watched that night, one truth remained crystal clear: sometimes the most powerful strike is not the one you throw, but the one you refuse to return.